Thank you for taking the time to watch this episode of Life Support. If you enjoy the content, we would ask that you like it, hit subscribe, and share it with your friends. All right, welcome to Life Support. It's so good to have you here. And this is a unique program. We talk about some difficult stories, but the stories we want you to hear about involve Christ and how he redeems us from all kinds of different human situations. And one of those is some are incarcerated right now. Some are sitting in a jail cell. Some wondering if there's any hope. And we want to reach out to those people. And so my guest is Heather Rice-Minus. She is the president and CEO of Prison Fellowship. And she was with us last week. We found out a lot about this ministry, but it's all fascinating stuff. And Heather, thanks a lot for being with us again. I appreciate that.
Oh, thank you again for having me, Pastor Johnson. It's great to be here.
So tell me again, give me an overview of Prison Fellowship. What is it? What do you do? How many prisons are you in? That kind of thing.
Yes, so Prison Fellowship is the nation's largest Christian nonprofit serving people in prison, coming home, their families, wardens, and we're also a leading advocate for justice. And we have been around for nearly 50 years. We have intensive programs, our academy, as well as our GROW program, in over 200 prisons across the country. And then we also provide Bibles and other Christian content and facilitate the Angel Tree program, which connects incarcerated parents to their kids in thousands of prisons across the country as well.
And Chuck Colson is the founder, household name for many, especially those who are of a certain age. But what an amazing story that he went through and how God used him and his experiences to really launch this ministry that will go on and on and on. It's a pretty amazing story.
It is. It's such big shoes to fill, impossible to fill, such an incredible legacy that Chuck has left us. And even though he passed away in 2012, and I actually started at the ministry, my first role on our policy team started in 2013, shortly after he passed. So I never got to meet him, but I have spent a lot of time reading his documents of starting the ministry, and he had such a passion for equipping the local church, and that's something that continues to be part of our mission and vision today.
Yeah, and if you lived through Watergate, that was such a massive story in the United States. And it dominated the headlines for months and months and months. And all of those conspirators became household names. G. Gordon Liddy, others, and then Chuck Colson. And all of a sudden we hear, oh, Chuck Colson, who we thought was just going to go to prison and we'd never hear his name again, has become a Christian and he's writing books. And wow, what a transformation, right?
That's right. I mean, to go from being known as Nixon's hatchet man to being known for his Born Again book that so many have read, and to see not only that it was this born again story, but this decades and decades, right, of being consistent, and so many books that he produced, so many lives that he changed. And even our sister organization, the Colson Center, continues to speak out on some of the issues he was most passionate about, and challenges all of us to live from a Christian worldview in all that we do. So I'm so grateful for his legacy.
Yeah. And Heather, you came to Prison Fellowship out of law school, right? And you
Right.
said it's big shoes to fill, but here you are.
Yes.
How did that work, working your way up through the organization, and how did you end up running the organization?
Yes. So as I mentioned, I started in 2013, and I took a role on, we have a small but mighty team that does work on justice reform at the federal and state level. And so was passionate about using my background in law and policy to ensure that our gospel values bore out in the public square. Got to work on big pieces of legislation at Prison Fellowship, like the First Step Act and restoring Pell Grants for incarcerated students to pursue higher education in prison. And my predecessor, James Ackerman, our former CEO, I think, started to realize that the Lord wanted him to make sure he was raising up a successor. And so he had his eye on me, and just said, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I never meant to talk about prison fellowship, but I thought maybe one day I'll go back to working on policy in the adoption or child welfare space, run a small organization. I said, "Do you think I could ever be a CEO?" James had been a CEO, from his 30s and had been a turnaround CEO of many different media companies actually before he came to prison fellowship. And he didn't hesitate. He just said, "You absolutely could." And I think from that moment on is really when he started thinking about really intentionally pouring into me and giving me more opportunity at Prison Fellowship. So, in addition to the work I did on advocacy, I began to do some fundraising. I began to take over the church mobilization department eventually, which includes our Prison Fellowship Angel Tree program. And so, got more and more exposure to different parts of the department. And then we started a very intentional transition and succession process. Was mentored not only by James, but my former board chairman, Carl Dill, who's a professional coach, took me on and coached me for many years. And I decided at the beginning of that I was just going to be totally honest with him and share with him all my problems and things I wanted to work on. And if he still thought I could do the job at the end of that, then maybe he was on to something. And so he still coaches me to this day. I'm super grateful for the very intentional process and opportunity I've had at Prison Fellowship. I'm not only the first woman to lead the organization in 50 years, but I'm also the first person to be called from within the organization to become CEO.
Good for you. And the organization that you run is big.
Yes.
It has a lot of moving parts. It's well known. It has a national brand to it. So when it comes to your personal faith and you're overseeing this massive thing, how does your faith and how does your relationship with Christ empower you each day to take on the challenges that you face?
Mm. Well, goodness, I'm so grateful that I have my walk with the Lord because otherwise, this kind of responsibility I think would just be crushing. And even yesterday, once a month, we meet as a team. We've got about 300 staff nationwide at Prison Fellowship, and we come online virtually and we meet for prayer. And we even break up into virtual small groups, so you get randomly assigned. And even yesterday, we had a prayer prompt message on the story of God providing this manna and how every day, people would just get their daily fill, right? And that's sometimes how it feels at Prison Fellowship and leading this organization is every day I have to get down on my knees and just pray for total dependence on God. And it's amazing, um, Pastor Johnson, because he'll bring these divine appointments that I am in no way qualified to meet this person, but he'll just open a door. Or he'll give me a team member who complements a weakness I have. And so that's how we're able to move forward. And so super grateful for that. But in answer to your question, it's a lot of prayer, it's a lot of dependence on the Holy Spirit. And knowing that I'm really not leading this thing on my own. I've got an amazing team, an amazing board, and first and foremost, it's always and will always be the Lord's ministry.
Yeah, that's good. I'm interested in how leadership has changed in America, or the perception of leadership has changed. Where if you read a leadership book maybe 20 years ago, it would be about how to get your agenda across, how to format an organization under what you want to do. Now, secular Christian, it's all about servant leadership, right?
Mm.
People are going to respond to you if you're authentic. People are going to love you if you're transparent. You can't lead if you're not willing to put yourself out there. And what you just described is a very humble leader, someone who's willing to say, hey, listen, I'm not perfect. We're going to work on this together. How do you find people respond to that kind of an attitude?
Well, I'll share even a transparent moment from my prayer group yesterday. So here I am with colleagues from, maybe 8 colleagues, one of whom I just met that day. She was new. And so we're sharing our prayer request together. And I'm coming up on the 1 year anniversary of my dad passing away. And, so it was just kind of hitting me in that moment. And sometimes grief just strikes you, right, when you least expect it. And so I start tearing up, sharing my prayer request with them. And they were just so gracious. And one of my colleagues even said, last year when your dad passed, I read all about him and on the posts I saw, and he sounds like an amazing man. And so they just prayed over me. And so just the ability to be vulnerable and transparent, it's such a gift. And I'm so grateful I get to work at Prison Fellowship. When I started here over a decade ago, I woke up every day loving my job. I feared becoming a leader of Prison Fellowship would mean I wouldn't wake up loving my job. And not to say there
Right,
aren't,
right. Hmm.
but so much of what keeps me going is the people that I get to work alongside, and they really do. They do love each other, and they love me, and I get a chance to love them. And our goal, if you work at Prison Fellowship, is to ensure that you leave better than you came, that we poured into you not just as an employee, but as a brother or sister in Christ.
Heather Rice Magnus is my guest, president and CEO of Prison Fellowship. We talked a little bit about Angel Tree. Now, most of the people listening right now attend a church, and likely that church has a facility somewhere within their sphere of influence. It might not be right next door, but there's enough of them where you probably have something nearby. And Angel Tree is a great way for the local church to connect with the community and that particular community, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, so many times churches talk about, we want to be an outreach to the local community and we want our church to grow. Well, Prison Fellowship Angel Tree is an answer to that goal, because what we do is we actually geo assign the families that get signed up by their incarcerated parent, the kids who are going to receive a Christmas gift. You'll be assigned kids local as possible to your church. So you can say, we'll take 50 local kids. We'll look for those who are closest to you and assign them. And then you get the opportunity either to fulfill the gift wish by delivering to them, or some churches like mine, we host a party. We actually have a Christmas village party we host every year for the whole city, and we invite the Angel Tree families to come to that. And we have what we call the Angel Tree VIP room, where kids can come pick up their gifts. And then what we do is we share more about our church. Here's the youth group that we have available. Here's the kids programming we have available. And for even that, guardian, it's often a grandparent or mom or dad, right, who's stepping in the gap if that loved one's incarcerated. And we say, here's some small groups that we have available that might be of interest to you. And we have seen churches enfold Angel Tree families into the life of their church, not just at Christmas time, but year round. And that's really my heart for the program.
Yeah. And what is going on in the homes of these families when their loved one is incarcerated? What is life like for them on a
Right.
daily basis?
Well, you can only imagine, right? So you lose who is often, the person who's bringing in economic stability to that family, if they even had stability at one point, but then you lose that person. And so a lot of times, I'm making calls right now. I help coordinate and volunteer with Angel Tree at my church, and I'm making calls to the families to get the gift wishes.
Wait a minute,
And
you run the organization and you're the volunteer in charge of Angel Tree?
at my church, yes, not
Oh, I
nationwide.
know, but that's, they could have found someone else and said, like, give her a break. Like she has to deal with this every day.
Well, when I took over church mobilization in Angel Tree, I said, I want to see how this program works. And I can't stop doing it. I have an amazing colleague who's become, the lead coordinator. And she's way better at it than I am, but I still love participating, and I love making the calls to the families. And let me tell you, Pastor Johnson, what moves me every time is, I talked to a woman this weekend, and I'm like, what kind of toys does, Jamal like? And she's given me a couple ideas, and she said, you know what, though? He really just needs some socks and underwear and a coat. That would be the most important thing. And so these are the kinds of requests we also get. And so a lot of times people are experiencing instability, poverty, uncertainty about their future, about their loved one's future behind bars. And sometimes, it can be a parent that family's in touch with regularly, a family who we've grown near and dear to at our house that we delivered to maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that we're still in touch with. In fact, the girls from the Angel Tree family have become my daughter's babysitters. And I can't guarantee any of your listeners that they'll get a babysitter out of the deal with Angel Tree, but that's been the blessing we've had. And they talk to their dad regularly on the phone, but they haven't seen him. Actually, one of the girls never met her dad. And so we're preparing to, hopefully help drive them down to visit him because he's out of state. And in other cases, maybe that parent hasn't been in touch. And I've heard stories where And I've met people inside, dads inside, where they said Angel Tree was the first way I got to reconnect with my child. And it provided an opportunity for me to do something because I haven't been able to do anything for my child or my family in all these years. And you, the church, helped me be able to actually provide something. And that sometimes reopens the door to reconciliation for what can sometimes be, a lot of bitterness that has grown as a result of that person going behind bars.
I'm guessing there's also a fear that if you delve into Angel Tree, that you're going to get sucked into this long-term relationship, or you might be afraid of the person that you might interact with, but that's not really what happens, right? There's safeguards around that, right?
Well, so, I would say there's a variety of ways to get involved with Prison Fellowship Angel Tree. The biggest need is fulfilling the gift wishes. So at our church, we probably have 60 different, gifts that have come in from different volunteers. But then there's a smaller team of us who are involved in the ongoing ministry. And so we provide some training around that and what to expect. But let me tell you, not only have I not had a bad experience with the families I've gotten to interact with Angel Tree, but I'll never forget the first year I delivered to a couple of families, including the one I mentioned, who have become our babysitters. But the other one was a grandmother, and I went over to deliver gifts to her, and I brought my daughter. And when we got there, she had gifts for my girls.
Mhm.
Uh, and she asked me to sit down and she asked what she could pray for my family for. And then we prayed for her and her son, who's been incarcerated for a long time, and her grandkids. So not only would I say these families, are not to be feared at all. You're going to get to encounter Christ as you get an opportunity to fellowship with Angel Tree families.
That's good. Heather Rice Minus is the president and CEO of Prison Fellowship and in charge of Angel Tree at her own church. They've got her working overtime as a volunteer, running that whole operation. So we've got a couple minutes left here. What does the future look like for Prison Fellowship, and what are some of your hopes and dreams that people can pray about?
Well, our vision, Pastor Johnson, is revival of the church inside and outside prison to bring justice, mercy, and hope to our culture. And we live, as many people are well aware, especially at this time of year, in a very divided country. And I believe so many people who don't know Jesus are skeptical of him, and they are very carefully watching how we are as believers and how we're living out our faith. And I think Prison Fellowship presents such an amazing opportunity for people to be a consistent witness, to step into caring for the marginalized, to step into advocating for justice. And I believe, and we are praying fervently at Prison Fellowship, that would bring not only revival into prisons, but revival to the church at large in America. And I know, we cannot manufacture revival. God alone brings revival, but we can posture ourselves for it. We can pray for it. And I would just ask your listeners to pray for that, and that churches across this country would be moved and encounter Jesus in a fresh way as they come to visit prison.
Yeah, and if I'm in a church, and as a pastor, we have these kind of meetings all the time, and you're always asking, what can we do to further the kingdom? What can we do to attach ourselves to our community? And there are some things that are just outside of our reach that we don't have the resources to do, or we don't, God didn't position us to do that. But here's something, it's basically already done. All you have to do is say yes, and the structure's there.
Right.
So how can a pastor that's mulling this over and thinking, oh, it's Christmas, our church should be involved with something, how would they get in touch with Prison Fellowship and get started?
Right. I would come to prisonfellowship.org. Our contact information is there. We've got a great front desk that can direct you, but we have so many resources for churches. We have an entire church mobilization team that wants to come alongside, whether it's the pastor or if you've got a lead volunteer or other staff member who's going to be point. We can equip you with resources. We have an annual staff conference every September called the Restore Conference. Next year we'll be in Rock City Church in Ohio. And so that's a great place to get plugged in, not only with some great speakers and breakouts and training, but also to network with other churches and pastors who are engaged in this work. But at Prison Fellowship, it is our privilege to really equip the local church, and that's what we want to do.
And churches of any size, right?
That's right. Big or small, there is a way for you to get involved. And Prison Fellowship Angel Tree Christmas, we ask churches to take a minimum of 10 kids. My small group alone has served 10 kids at Angel Tree, and so through Angel Tree Christmas. And so there's a way for anybody to get involved. We want that call, and we want to equip you in what Matthew 25 asks you to do, and we try and make it as easy as possible.
Now, I'm sure you probably have some influence over your small group. I'm the president and CEO of the organization. And that's a great reminder. Like, it doesn't, even if your church isn't on board, you can be.
Right.
An individual can be.
Well, and let me tell you, so often, we're talking to pastors, and what we find is some of our most successful church partnerships are because there is a layperson who rose their hand and said yes, and they're organizing it. I attend a church in DC. There's an amazing woman, Angel, who's this year coordinating as lead the Angel Tree program, and now I just get to volunteer with it. But she has started a ministry at our church called Love Justice, and it has become the hub. We've got 40 or 50 volunteers helping with Angel Tree, responding to letters from the incarcerated, visiting the local jail. And it's oftentimes that champion, whether they're on staff or they're a layperson, who really becomes the point person. And so I don't know, I'm sure it's a common thing for pastors. At mine, they say, you got a passion, then we want to equip you to do it. And so I would encourage pastors listening, who's that person who might raise their hand and say yes, and we at Prison Fellowship can equip them to run with it.
And again, your website, how do you get involved?
Yes, www.prisonfellowship.org.
Okay. Heather, you're doing a great work. Thank you so much for spending time with us. I really, really appreciate it.
Likewise.